Hey, this is Pastor Ryan of Faith to Walk Ministries, and I'm doing this video for some questions given to me on YouTube, and people are wanting to know why the King James Version uses these, thous, and ye's. So we're going to go into that. Give a little bit about my background, though. Yes, I was saved in a church that primarily used the King James Version, but when I was about 23, 24, I started using the NIV, used it for many years. The New King James Version, used it for many years, used the NASB. Yes, I have the ESV. I have the Christian Standard Bible. But after 5 years of studying it, I started realizing there's really two major streams or manuscript streams that the Bible's from. And that is the stream from Antioch, from northern stream, and then we have the Alexandrian Egypt, or the southern stream. And what is interesting about this is the northern stream is where we get the majority text, the Byzantine text, the Textus Receptus, and I'll do another video on that, why I believe that is the most accurate, and so we'll do that later. But today is, once again, why we use these, thous, ye's. When the King James Version translators were doing it, they weren't using those words because they want to be more majestic and classical. No, it's not what they did, or royal. It's not what they did at all. The biggest thing is the Hebrew and Greek is a very precise language. They had very precision on their language. And for instance, they had a word for you when you're talking to one person. They had a different word for you if you talk to everybody or a group of people. Like now, if you want to talk to a person in the crowd, you say, "Hey, you." Well, you don't know if they're talking to that person or are they talking about, "Hey, you," the whole crowd. But the Hebrew and Greek had a word for both of those. Well, we don't in the English we use today. So the King James Version translators wanted to be most accurate to the Hebrew and Greeks. What they did is they went back to the classical English, and that's where they found their answer. So here's an example. John chapter 3, verse 7. Jesus is talking to Nicodemus, and he says, "Marvel not that I said unto thee, ye must be born again." So let's break this down. "Marvel not that I said unto thee," Nicodemus. He's talking to Nicodemus. "Ye, everyone, must be born again." See, if you just put, "Marvel not that I said unto you, you must be born again," well, a case could be said if somebody's saying, well, he's just talking to Nicodemus, and he's just telling Nicodemus he has to be born again. It doesn't apply to us today. Well, it does, because the Greek has a word, "Marvel not that I said unto thee," a word for singular, "ye," and they had a different word for plural. So the King James Version translators used the classical English and answered that question. "Marvel not that I said unto thee, Nicodemus, ye must be born again." And a lot of people say, but I just want to see you and you there. And we can footnote the difference. So every time you'd read thee, you'd have number one, go to the bottom, singular. And every time you saw you, you'd see number two, go to the bottom, plural. And that would be annoying. And you would know, because there are some passages that you could get the meaning misunderstood without knowing that distinguishing factor. So when they went to the classical, they answered it. "Marvel not that I said unto thee, Nicodemus, ye, everyone must be born again." Now, knowing that, when you read the King James, it's going to flow so much better. So now another question is, why do we use est, est, and eth, eth? Well, there's a reason for that too, and it's because precision. So let's get an example. Psalm 65, verse 2. And he's talking to God. So when you use est, it's when you're talking to somebody. So est is second person singular. So he's talking to God. "O thou that hearest prayer, unto thee shall all flesh come." So he's talking to God. So when you're talking to somebody, "Thou singest, thou hearest, thou prayest." So he's talking to. So even if you didn't know the thou, just looking at the est, you would know he's talking to somebody. To somebody. So that's important. So what about the eth, f? Let's look at James chapter, 4, verse 6. James 4, 6. This is a really good one because it really has some good examples in it. So let me get there. James 4, 6. Here we go. James 4, verse 6. Okay. So, here he's not talking to God, such as thou hearest. He's talking about God. So, but he, talking about God, giveth more grace. Wherefore he saith, God resisteth the proud, but giveth grace unto the humble. So he's talking about somebody. And the ETH shows you is talking about somebody. If this verse was singular and they were talking to God, it would say, but thou givest more grace. Wherefore thou sayest, thou resistest the proud, but givest grace unto the humble. So that would be if he's talking to God, but he's talking about God. Therefore, but he giveth more grace. Wherefore he saith, God resisteth the proud, but giveth grace unto the humble. So, and a lot of people is, now you're going to understand EST, talking to somebody, ETH, you're talking about somebody. And as a lot of people say, well, I just don't like the sentence structure. I can't understand the sentence structure. Once again, why do they use the sentence structure like they did? They wanted to be more precise to the Hebrew and Greek. When the King James Version translators translated it, got a helicopter going over. Anyway, when they translated it, they didn't translate it to be more easily read. They translated it to English to be as accurate as to the Hebrew and Greek as possible. Therefore, they would follow sentence structure of the Hebrew and Greek as well, such as Galatians 2:20, one of my favorite verses. I am crucified with Christ. Nevertheless I live, yet not I, but Christ liveth in me. And the life which I now live in the flesh, I live by the faith of the Son of God, who loved me and gave himself for me. Now somebody might read that and say, well, I want to structure that easily, a little bit easier, so it's easier to read. Me personally, I don't want that. I want it to be as close to the Hebrew and Greek as possible. And I think it's when you read it that way, you start to realize, wow, that's pretty well how they read it. And that is, to me, is more precious. And a lot of people say, when I read it, I can't understand it. The sentences just, they all run together. Well, if you read it like this, I'm crucified with Christ, nevertheless I live, not I, but Christ live with me, and the life, blah, 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 blah. Yeah, you could get confused if you're trying to read it very simply. There are punctuation marks. Use them. It will flow. For instance, I am crucified with Christ. Nevertheless I live, yet not I, but Christ liveth in me. And the life which I now live in the flesh, I live by the faith of the Son of God, who loved me and gave himself for me. You see how that flowed? So knowing now why they use these and thous, ye's, est, eth, in the sentence structure, you should see that it flows. Now, one thing that's very interesting is we have people who are college graduates now who say they cannot read the King James Version. Here's food for thought. In the early 1900s, the third grade reading textbook, he got it, was a King James Version. Third grade. Let that sink in. Hey, thanks for watching. God bless.